As these players are getting ready to set up and get into game, let's take a look at Cary's team. That is going to be the Kyogre and Calyrex core with a couple of really cool techs on there. We haven't been seeing a lot of Kyogre with Thunder. A lot of players have been dropping that. And looks like Calyrex has the wrong seed move.
Is this a team sheet error? Yeah, I think it's pretty cool in this matchup, right? I think obviously the nature of rain, a lot of water type Pokemon, and there's a lot of water type hate on this team. This Seed Bomb, this Calyrex not going to sit here and make us watch lead seed animations for several turns. Instead, going to simply try to knock out Pokemon. The Thunder on Kyogre, similarly something that's very impactful here. You'll see in a second, Gavin's Kyogre does not have that Thunder, which could be impactful for forcing terrestrializations in this matchup. And then speaking of terrestrializations, I think interesting to kind of take a look at this team where there's a lot of the Fire, Water, Grass core sort of Pokemon who can become a different member of the Fire, Water, Grass core after terrestrializing. It tends to be a lot of really strong defensive typing that way, kind of like the classic way to use terrestrialization.
And of course, we can't ignore the Iron Jugulus in the room. This was a Pokemon that we saw be very powerful on rain teams in the past. And here, Cary is bringing it back out, and it makes a lot of sense. Offers really good tailwind support for the team, as well as access to Snarl, which if we are seeing a bunch of Calyrex Shadow Riders like we have been, I imagine that has been very important for Cary over the course of this tournament.
Yeah, that Tailwind could be really critical, both Tailwind and Trick Room on that team, so sort of a tricky team preview to play against where, you know, even though you get the open team sheet, sometimes it's like fake information. Like, well, I know he has a fast mode and a slow mode, so basically all of the Pokemon could be either direction, potentially in the way that their speed was trained.
Well, here is Gavin's team on your screen as well. This is our final Grimmsnarl left in the tournament. After being very prevalent throughout our Swiss rounds here in Top Cut, it is just Gavin with the Grimmsnarl. And actually a little bit of an interesting set there, has the Sucker Punch option instead of the Thunder Wave that we've been seeing. As well, have to shout out the Basculegion that Gavin is running as a Swift Swim user, as opposed to the Urshifu on the other hand on Cary's side. Both filling kind of the same sort of niche there, but offering more ghost type coverage and just more raw power out of Wave Crash.
It could be critical. This matchup, you'd assume with two Kyogre, pretty much always going to have Rain active, and there's not a whole lot differentiating Gavin. Like that Sucker Punch you mentioned, the Grimmsnarl, kind of good in other matchups, probably not so much in this one. So we'll have to see what he has for opposing Kyogre teams.
Well, here is the two Kyogre out on the field as appropriate as possible for the Pacific Northwest. It is a Kyogre and a Grass type right next to it. Gavin will protect his Kyogre from any damage coming out from Cary's side. Actually, both Amoonguss and Kyogre will be protecting just to waste this fake out pressure and sort of see and scout out what Cary wants to do here.
Yeah, I feel like we've seen an awful lot of first turn double protects today, but this one makes a lot of sense, right? Where there's not really any advantage to trying to predict the fake out when you can just go for the double protect here. Water Spout, dangerous, but both these Pokemon resisting water type attacks. So now in the second turn, it's a little bit more interesting. You have the option of trying to go for a Thunder if you're Cary. I think that'd be a little bold with Amoonguss there and the opposing Kyogre otherwise in a decent position. But we see a terrestrialization right off the bat.
Yep, that is going to be the first Kyogre terrestrializing into a Grass type. Of course, both of these Kyogre have that available to them. The classic terrestrialization for this Pokemon that will be Gavin's, which will move first and go for a Water Spout and deal good damage to both the Rillaboom and the Kyogre on Cary's side. Cary is also going to fire back with a Water Spout that deals significantly less damage after taking the damage from the first Water Spout. This Wood Hammer, though, will even things up and a little bit more onto the Kyogre, while Amoonguss will just heal all of that damage right back up and bring that Kyogre almost at full.
Yeah, it's going to get Water Spout nearer back to its maximum damage. You see huge difference in the trade there because the Kyogre on Cary's side had already taken damage. You may have already noticed, we didn't call it out when it happened, but it was Gavin's Kyogre that activated the Drizzle ability, indicating that it's probably faster after also moving first that previous turn. So an advantage here. Cary may be going to need speed control a little bit more than Gavin, who naturally has the advantage even though his Grass-type Pokemon is slower.
And we are in a really interesting situation here where neither of these Kyogre can hit the other for super effective damage anymore with that terrestrialization. No one has an Ice Beam here. It's Thunder on Cary's side, and then only Water type attacks for Gavin. But Gavin doesn't need type coverage. He just needs to be able to fire off these Water Spouts and heal back up with Pollen Puff. And Rillaboom, after taking 2 Water Spouts and recoil damage, is down to 23 hit points before the recoil damage from this Wood Hammer will just knock it right out.
awkward there where Rillaboom getting some potentially good damage now, but if there's another Pollen Puff, that's going to be irrelevant. But no, just a Spore. So not so bad for Cary then. Now at least gets the HP advantage with his own Kyogre, able to make a free switch. I guess free maybe in air quotes there, since you didn't lose a Pokemon to do it, but it would have been very low health anyway. So not the worst thing in the world, perhaps.
Right, we see our final Pokemon for Cary are going to be Calyrex and Urshifu. So bringing the Calyrex out here will love to face down against two now grass-type Pokemon. Of course, we also know that Cary has the ability to turn that Calyrex into a grass-type as well and continue to resist the water-type damage coming out from Gavin's.
It could be a very critical Pokemon this matchup with the Calyrex. Tricker may be less appealing with the Amoonguss on the other side of the field, but yeah, I mean, you've got two water-type attackers into a rain team, which is known for mostly using water-type Pokemon, so may struggle a little bit with the type your Calyrex is going to need to get some work done.
Yeah, here is the Terastallization for Cary's Calyrex. We'll go ahead and Terastallize into that grass type. And now that the Calyrex has Terastallized, it's really only the opposing Calyrex that can hit that for super effective damage. Well, that and of course Amoonguss with Pollen Puff, but Amoonguss won't be going on the offensive, will just be protecting here to protect itself from a Glacial Lance, while Kyogre on Gavin's side fires off an Origin Pulse and deals decent damage, but the Terra, the critical hit helping a lot on that Kyogre, and the Terra really protecting Calyrex from having to take any kind of real damage from that Origin Pulse. Here's a kind of mediocre Water Spout, just tickling Kyogre. They're watering the flower on its head, but this Glacial Lance will freeze those roots and knock that Pokemon right out and give a Grim Nade, or give a boost to the Calyrex Ice Rider.
Thinking the Chilling Nade boost or turning Kyogre perhaps into Ice Water. Very bulky Pokemon, much more so on the special side than the physical side, and I think we're probably going to see a lot of these two Terastallizations. Both these restricted Pokemon kind of forced to pay the tax in order to gain resistances necessary to duke it out in this matchup. And that will be Gavin who gets the not quite so free switch there. Hurts a little bit more losing your restricted Pokemon, but it certainly got a lot of damage out there, I think, in a matchup like this one, where it seemed like Gavin's Kyogre was kind of being threatened a little bit more by the opposing team composition. You're probably pretty happy with the amount of damage it winds up doing there, even though, in a perfect world, you would have gotten the Pollen Puff off and looks like a chance of surviving Calyrex, perhaps.
Absolutely, but it's now Calyrex on Gavin's side that has the type advantage because Cary did Terastallize into that grass typing. That means that Gavin would be able to hit it for super effective damage with his own Glacial Lance. And at low health, Kyogre on Cary's side really can't rely on that Water Spout for any kind of significant damage. We'll have to be going for Origin Pulses or Thunders in the rain, but Amoonguss will just redirect any damage coming out towards that Calyrex. The Hydro Pump, is actually the choice for Cary. Will connect onto the Amoonguss, and with the follow-up of the Glacial Lance, knock that Pokemon right out as well. That is another Chilling Nade boost for Cary's Calyrex, but will have to survive a Glacial Lance coming out from Gavin's Calyrex. Crucially, though, Cary's Calyrex did move first here, so that means that in the future, potentially that Calyrex will be able to keep firing off those Glacial Lances as both Kyogre and Calyrex survive, even after another critical hit.
Yeah, Cary's Pokemon both saying nay there as Calyrex whiffs on the boost. We got this poor Kyogre's been hit with two different critical hits still on the field, really showing the natural bulk of that Pokemon. And one of the advantages to it, right? You've seen a lot of other restricted Pokemon. Most of them, I guess, other than Ice Rider Calyrex itself, tend to be a little bit on the frailer side. And even that healing from the grassy terrain, the difference between being still on the field and being knocked out for the Kyogre.
All right, well, Gavin has lost two Pokemon, and usually that's not a great place to be, but when you have a Basculegion in the back, that is just boosting the power of Last Respects. Now at 150 base power for this attack, we'll be able to easily knock out either of these Pokemon and very much threaten whatever the final Pokemon Cary has in the back. You can see that Cary has to protect Kyogre here, does not want to take any damage from the Basculegion just yet, and Gavin neither wants to get damage dealt to that Pokemon as well. It's actually just going to be protects all around. 3 protects, Gavin, is it going to be 4? No, it's a free Trick Room here for Gavin, and without Rain, the Basculegion does not have Swift Swim active, and that could be very interesting. importantly, that means that Gavin's Calyrex is likely the fastest thing on the field.
Yeah, I was going to say there's kind of a weird speed sandwich here with the way the speeds have been set up, but I think it's a really great free trick room. I don't know if that's what Gavin was expecting to happen, but both these Pokemon are pinned now. We're going to see probably a double protect.
Yeah, just one protect there onto the Kyogre, which did fail, and that is a double KO for that Glacial Lance, which means that a +2 buff will be going towards that Calyrex Ice Rider, and Basculegion is also there.
Hanging out, providing moral support. Sort of an awkward battle for it. We're no longer going to have any potential of getting the rain, which I guess might hurt it more than help in this situation. But with 2 Chilling Neigh boosts and a 2v1 advantage, Gavin looking really great in this first game of this set. Sort of an awkward matchup with the way that the speeds are playing out, but perhaps both players getting some great information here, although I kind of wonder if both of them didn't already know some of this information. They're both playing really quickly compared to some of the other matches we've seen, and I don't think this is like a particularly simple matchup for either side, so I think they probably both thought about this one a little bit.
All right, and Cary is done with game 1. We'll just go ahead and retreat here. Recognizes that Urshifu cannot pull anything off here in front of both the Basculegion and a full health Calyrex. That means Gavin Michaels is 1 game away from making it into the finals here in Portland. Cary is going to need to win 2 in a row to keep his tournament dreams and the dreams of a championship alive. And really interesting, like you mentioned, this is not a super straightforward matchup, but these players are moving so quickly. They definitely have been coming into this with the game plan, but Cary's going to need to go back to the drawing board after that game 1.
Yeah, I'm going to guess both of them, maybe they thought through game 2 and game 3 already as well, where they do get some information that, if they didn't already have it, one player has a faster Kyogre, the other player has a faster Calyrex, so it's going to be a little awkward where maybe it'll change how both of the trainers want to prioritize the order they try to score knockouts in. We do have the Amoonguss for both players as well, making the Trick Room angle a little bit scarier. But hey, it seems like half the Pokemon in this game have a Grass-type Terastallization to use to try to gain that Spore immunity. And one thing I didn't get a chance to call out with how quick the game was going, but boy, I haven't seen a Hydro Pump from Kyogre in a while. That did a lot to the Amoonguss.
Yeah, that's actually going to be the Hydro Pump, Water Spout, and Thunder for Cary's Kyogre, which, it's kind of risky, but when it hits, it hits.
Yeah, I guess it's a problem because, as you said, once you've been weakened a little bit, you no longer have any reliable attacks, right? Where Thunderbolt a little limited from a type chart perspective. Also, if it's not raining, not very accurate. Hydro Pump, famously the most reliable move of the game. But we're getting the second set here, and we see a little bit adjustment where one side we have a Kyogre-based game plan, and it's the Calyrex-based game plan on the other side.
I think this is an excellent lead here for Cary, having the Calyrex and Rillaboom immediately on the field, the ability to threaten that Grass Terra on Calyrex and neuter the Spore, as well as force a Terra on Gavin's Kyogre with Woodhammer.
Yeah, I really like the combination of attacks here because, there's kind of attacks that Gavin seems to need to pay with the Kyogre Terastallizing against Grass, and then, Calyrex can exploit that, right? And I think having both of those out at the same time makes things a little bit more difficult. Probably going to be a protect and a switch for Gavin so that he gets in a position where he can punish a double into Kyogre a little bit better.
Well, there's the first part of that. That's a switch from the Amoonguss into Calyrex, as we do know that Cary will be going for this Terastallization on Calyrex, turning that Pokemon into a Grass type. So we'll be weak to the Calyrex on Gavin's side, but for now, we'll just be able to resist and tank any attacks coming out from that Kyogre, which, like you called out, is going for a protect right now. This means that Cary has the opportunity to go for big attacks like a Woodhammer into what was Amoonguss. Now Calyrex deals a lot of damage in the grassy terrain, and this Glacial Lance will put it as well under 50% and likely in range of another Woodhammer.
Well, it makes this position much more difficult.
It was so awkward. Yeah,
because Gavin's going to have to make a read. Rillaboom is going to get a ton of damage on a Woodhammer if it connects with one of these 2 Pokemon. So what's it going to go after? And then in response, do you Terastallize one or both of, or not both of them, one of them, or go for another Protect Switch play something. But these are 2 Pokemon that are dealing a lot of damage, so it's pretty tough to ignore them.
Yeah, but this Calyrex on Gavin's side does have leftovers and grassy terrain recovery. Has the opportunity to potentially stall out if Cary tunnels a little bit too much on that Pokemon, which, of course, you would want to because you are showing 2 grass types.
Yeah, I think that's the scary thing here. There's also the option on Cary's side, if you want to go for a potential trick room, but we're going to see a protect from Gavin's Calyrex.
That's a protect, avoiding any damage from Cary's side. And speaking of avoiding, Origin Pulse will miss Rillaboom. Rillaboom dodges that, goes for the Wood Hammer right into the Calyrex again, but because of the protect, does not deal any damage. Likewise, Cary goes for the Glacial Lance and will not do any damage to Gavin's Calyrex, but will connect and do a little bit of chip onto that Kyogre.
Yeah, it's going to at least reduce the damage of a powerful water. Jeez.
It's a little bit more than a little bit.
Yeah, these resisted hits are still feeling pretty painful here, and that will significantly reduce the damage of Water Spout if Kyogre goes for it. Gavin did not there, perhaps expecting a Grassy Glide into that slot, which would have really damaged the potential of any Water Spouts, but winds up being a relatively safe trade in both directions, except for, we've changed the protect positioning.
Here's a Water Spout from Gavin's Kyogre, which, like you mentioned, because it took a little bit more damage than expected, doesn't deal as much to Cary's Pokemon. U-turn into Calyrex from Rillaboom will deal super effective damage and take away the recovery from the Grassy Terrain and leftovers as Rillaboom pivots out in favor of Kyogre on Cary's own. That Pokemon now out on the field, and the Seed Bomb boosted by the Grassy Terrain and the Terastallization targeting down into the Calyrex. Not quite enough. Calyrex just barely hanging on with one tick of Grassy Terrain and or leftovers. Fires right back with a Glacial Lance, super effective damage onto Cary's Calyrex, and that Pokemon is now down.
Yeah, that's potentially a huge knockout there. Not only getting rid of a restricted Pokemon, but critically a Pokemon that had gained resistance to those water-type attacks that are so prevalent on Gavin's team. If once again that final Pokemon is Basculegion, it's a pretty convenient Pokemon to remove. One thing to keep in mind too, both Kyogre on the field now. If again it is the Basculegion as the final Pokemon, I think unlikely Gavin's going to want to go a Trick Room direction in this game, given how weakened this Calyrex is already. So may want to look for an option where you can try to cycle the Kyogre in and out and reset that Drizzle. Not infinite like it was in our day.
Well, Rillaboom will come out to replace the Calyrex, and really importantly, Cary has now lost his type advantage into a Grass Terastallization. The Calyrex going down means we'll not be able to hit the Kyogre for super effective damage, except for with U-turn if it Terastallizes. And that could be really huge for Gavin on a defensive level.
Yeah, pretty tense position here where and Gavin is still a couple switches away from really being able to push the advantage he got from knocking at that Calyrex. It's still big to get the knockout, but choosing to protect the Kyogre here, it's going to have a little more work to do compared to last game, and protect the Calyrex as well. So just scouting this out. Again, lots of double protect today, it feels like.
Yeah, another turn of fake out pressure, just wasted with a double protect on the opposing side. And again, another turn of Grassy Terrain recovery, another turn of leftovers recovery for that Calyrex, which will help a little bit, but we'll probably need a little bit more to survive even a weakened Water Spout from Cary.
And I think critically, another turn for all these field effects, they get closer to expiring. They do all kind of make a big difference here, right? I think Cary's offense is quite a bit weaker once these field effects expire. Both have to worry about the rain expiring and losing the thunder accuracy and the boosted water power, as well as losing the increased priority on Grassy Glide, which could make a big difference here if Kyogre is on the field a turn from now.
Yeah, if the Kyogre stays on the field and does not Terastallize, would be at risk of getting Grassy Glide. But the Kyogre and Rillaboom on Cary's side are just trying to figure out a way to bust through the damage that they need to knock this Calyrex out. But Gavin's not going to let that happen. We'll just switch out to Amoonguss. So Basculegion not out yet. The Amoonguss that we saw at the very beginning right back out on the field, and now safe because Calyrex is off the field. Here is our Grass Terastallization on Gavin's Kyogre. Again, very safe to go for the Grass Terastallization now without a Calyrex on the opposite side, setting up for a very safe ability to tank this Grassy Glide, just take a little bit of damage from it, and then fire back with another Water Spout. The chip damage is adding up onto both of Cary's Pokemon, even though the Water Spout has been weakened.
Yeah, it's right on the edge, too, of a point where maybe the Kyogre could endure these attacks well enough to try to get another Pollen Puff off. But yeah, unfortunately for Gavin, you saw that missed Origin Pulse early in the game. I think without that, the Rillaboom would be pinned here. Because that didn't happen, I think it's just healthy enough that he'll be able to get one more attack off, potentially knock out a Kyogre with help from the ally Kyogre before it can be Pollen Puff. Looks like Cary's looking for some different plays, however. Both sides going to play this a little bit carefully. I think another thing to keep in mind here is that on Cary's side of the field, you want to be careful not to allow too many free turns. Even if you pick up the Kyogre, that low HP Calyrex is still in the back. We've seen some crazy Pollen Puff plays to get today already. You don't want to have one of those kind of no pressure turns where Amoonguss gets a cheeky heal on a Pokemon that's basically knocked out and you have to deal with it all over again.
Absolutely, and Cary has to retreat Rillaboom here under threat of a potential Basculegion in the back. Does not want Gavin to be able to reset Rain and bring that Pokemon in without the ability to Grassy Glide it. Instead, another Origin Pulse will be fired off, misses the Kyogre, but will connect onto Cary's Amoonguss, while Cary fires right back with a Water Spout, dealing more chip damage to both Kyogre and Amoonguss. Now, Amoonguss gets to fire off a Spore, but targeted into the Amoonguss, which was a Rillaboom. No Terastallization or anything there, just going for the Spore.
And so I got some good information for Gavin. Clearly expecting a different Pokemon back, and is firing away with some more Origin Pulses now. Yeah,
hitting both the Origin Pulses this time around, which means that the Water Spout gets a little bit weaker once again onto both Amoonguss and the Kyogre. And here we go. It looks like Regulation C, just replace Kyogre with Palafin. As Amoonguss Spores, Amoonguss Pollen Puffs, and everyone feels healthy and fine and well rested.
Yeah, I mean, why not, right? But you gotta be careful here. Now we're in that situation I was talking about before where the Kyogre got healed and Cary said it's great, but because it got put to sleep, there's only offensive pressure for this Amoonguss now. That Calyrex is really weak, but it could be at a point where it could be healed. Instead, the Kyogre to go the offense for now and probably get Amoonguss right at the point where one more Origin Pulse would do it.
Yeah, that looks like just enough damage to knock out the Amoonguss one more time, but Amoonguss will go for the Pollen Puff onto Gavin's Kyogre and knock it out. That's going to mean that Kyogre is off the field, but does potentially open up a free switch into the Calyrex with potential for Cary's Kyogre to stay asleep for one more turn.
Yeah, and also potential not to, right? So some scary flux here where neither side are going to know for sure if this Kyogre is going to be able to attack in the final turn. And I think on Gavin's side, I'm curious what this final Pokemon is. It's kind of interesting that we didn't come out sooner. You'd think it was Basculegion, he would have wanted to reset the Rain, but no, we do see Basculegion coming in. So we'll not have that Swift Swim boost that it might prefer, but hey, you know, it's water type attacks aren't going to be super powerful anyway, and there's a decent chance it's already the fastest Pokemon regardless.
Yeah, it is very possible for Basculegion to be faster than all of the Pokemon on the field, but this may be a situation where there is some still hidden information in terms of the speeds of all of these Pokemon. Gavin and Cary are both redirecting single target attacks their way to the Amoonguss. Kyogre is faster and wakes up. The Thunder, though, connects onto Amoonguss, does knock out that Pokemon with a critical hit, but did not connect onto the Basculegion. This means that Basculegion will be able to fire off an attack into that Amoonguss. That's the last respects. Both Amoonguss and Kyogre down. Easy knockout there.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's a nice knockout for Gavin, but now what, right? Where the Rillaboom's going to come right back out in the field. The fake-out pressure not going to do a whole lot here, but the Grassy Glide pressure is a little bit scarier. This Basculegion does have the ability to protect. You know, in the past we saw some Choice Band Basculegion, this one holding a Life Orb, so maybe some mind games here, but this Calyrex is still pretty weak, and it could be in danger of being knocked out by pretty much any attack available now. Perhaps except for the Grassy Glide.
Yeah, it is weakened, and the Kyogre, having taken that Pollen Puff, would probably be able to knock it out even after some turns of leftovers and grassy terrain recovery, but Gavin is going to try to give himself as many hit points as possible to tank these attacks. A double protect here, just healing up on both of his Pokemon.
Yeah, it really does need to avoid that fake out too, where it's just kind of exclusively bad for his side. The Grassy Glide goes into the Basculegion slot, and if you don't think that Basculegion is going to survive that, which seems fairly likely, it's not the most defensively sturdy of Pokemon. You're going to need Calyrex to somehow survive this, and didn't seem super great earlier. At least there's no Rain active now, but Kyogre is getting healthier and healthier as well.
Yeah, and that is just increasing the damage of Water Spout, and we already saw that Kyogre moved before the Basculegion, so we'll be able to fire off a very strong Water Spout without being targeted by any other damage. The only option that Gavin would have would be to Aqua Jet the Kyogre, and that's just not going to do enough damage to make that Water Spout more insignificant.
Yeah, that's true. I think Gavin really needed either to get Trick Room up sooner or to get a heal onto that Calyrex, but now it may be too late for Game 2, but it survives the Grassy Glide. Interesting.
Just barely, but it will not survive this Water Spout, and neither will the Calyrex on Gavin's side, and that means that Cary D'Ortona is forcing a Game 3 here. we are going to have to play one more game to see who will be joining Zhejiang in the finals here in Portland.
Really fun second game there. Close back and forth there, but Gavin just not able to find enough hit points to be able to survive those final attacks. These water spouts from the Kyogre are pretty devastating, and really excited to see how this game plays out. You know, I think both sides are kind of stuck where they sort of need to terrestrialize a specific Pokemon, so maybe don't have a lot of options to mix things up there, but I'm sure I think both sides kind of like one Pokemon slot maybe they can play with a little bit, as well as the order in which they send out Pokemon.
Absolutely, and I think the 4 Pokemon that Cary brought here is a great adaptation. The Urshifu was not offering anything from game 1. The Amoonguss was offering protection from that Basculegion that Gavin showed that he really wanted to set up to use here in the end game. And really critically here, Cary was the player who was able to sneak in a Pollen Puff and regain all of that health on his Kyogre, versus Gavin was unable to do so, wasn't able to protect his own Kyogre, was not able to re-heal all of the damage onto that Calyrex, and just that extra 50% damage powering up this water spout. Huge for Cary to be able to take that game.
Yeah, and now that Gavin's the one who needs to adjust, I'm kind of curious what you do, where like, I think the Basculegion did not look very good in either game 1 or game 2, but the options to replace it aren't super great. You know, Grimmsnarl typically, if you want to bring it, usually comes out in the lead, and that really changes your game plan. The problem for Gavin is like, the beginning of the game is pretty much going well, right? Where I think, you know, even as it was, he's maybe a Pollen Puff away, but you do try out the Flutter Mane maybe. I think it's probably going to need to be a gameplay-based adjustment for Gavin instead.
Well, it will be a Calyrex Kyogre lead for Gavin, and the Rillaboom and Calyrex for Cary. Again, I really like this Rillaboom and Calyrex lead for Cary. It definitely double threatens that Kyogre, makes it so that the terrestrialization into the grass type is not safe at all, and because of the Seed Bomb, is able to deal good damage with the grassy terrain into that Calyrex as well. Both Pokemon threatened on Gavin's side.
Sort of interesting switch up here for Cary, not going for the fake up. We'll have to see if this pays off or not. We're not going to get a double protect from Gavin, so maybe it will.
Yeah, the first time we're not seeing a double protect in front of fake out pressure. Here is the Origin Pulse coming out from the Kyogre, lands this time on the Rillaboom, dealing some decent damage there, as Rillaboom will go ahead and U-turn into the Calyrex and switch right back out. Does not want to take a Glacial Lance that's super effective into that Pokemon, and instead will bring in Cary's own Kyogre here.
Sort of a serious spot, because yeah, is it Glacial Lance or is it Trick Room?
That's going to be the Glacial Lance coming out from Calyrex, and will deal a little bit of damage to Cary's Kyogre here, but resisted damage, and like you mentioned, did not take the opportunity to set the Trick Room here, potentially also leading you to infer some of the things about the other 2 Pokemon remaining for Gavin.
On the plus side, you know, there's going to be a little healing for the Calyrex on Gavin's side, as well as the Kyogre on Cary's, so neither of them really being too impacted will slightly weaken the power of any water spouts, but because there was no speed control, we do know the quickest Pokemon here is going to be Gavin's Kyogre, so he is at least threatening some splash damage with the water spout onto both Pokemon, although we know that's not going to knock out either. So these Pokemon have been slugging out for 2 games, why not do it again in the 3rd?
Well, that's what slugs love, the rain and the nice grassy texture of the terrain here. Gavin will go ahead and fire off a huge water spout into Kyogre, brings it down with a critical hit to red health, and that is going to make this water spout pathetic. Very little damage dealt to Calyrex or Kyogre after that critical hit, even with a critical hit of his own. But that Seed Bomb with the terrestrialization in the grassy terrain, we've seen how much damage this does. It is not enough to pick up the KO. May have been really close if that water spout had been able to deal a little bit more. And Cary actually survives with 1 hit point on Kyogre, but Calyrex goes down to the Glacial Lance.
I might go straight to the PC and release this Kyogre after this game if I'm Cary. He could not have been trolled more. Not only does it get critical hit there to reduce its own damage, I guess the critical hit for it was kind of helpful, or you know, at least the opposing Kyogre isn't at full health now, but I think he would have been way better off if this Kyogre had been knocked out here, whereas now kind of a sitting duck for the opposing Kyogre, and things are looking really bleak for Cary here. This poor Kyogre's been a critical hit magnet. That's 3 times already.
Yeah, it's unfortunate for Cary to have this Kyogre stuck out on the field, especially since we know that Gavin's Kyogre is faster than it. The hope here is that Rillaboom will be able to buy some time with either a Fake Out or a Grassy Glide, or Cary has decided he does not want to play this out, and instead will send Gavin to the finals to face Zhejiang.
Oh, it's a tough way for the 3rd game to go, but a really exciting set by both players.